All right, welcome to our Cubase 11 preview event here. So I'm just gonna refresh and I'll just do a quick audio connection test. Give me just a second and we'll get started here in just a couple minutes. All right, just gonna check. Okay, so it sounds like audio is going through fine. All right. So this hangout will be kind of a different format than our usual hangouts. So we're not going to do, our usual kind of interactive Q&A, but we're going to go over some of the main features in Cubase 11, which is just released this past week. And I see before we even get started, we already have a thumbs down. So interesting, but we have a lot of thumbs up to offset that. So my name is Greg Undo. I work for the U.S. distributor of Steinberg products here. And I'll be the host for the Hangout. I'm based in Alexandria, Virginia in the United States, just outside Washington, D.C. area. So I know I see a lot of people that are used to, that we see on our Hangouts pretty regularly. So it's great to see it great to see you. And for people that aren't aware, as we do these Hangouts, we usually do these about twice a week, and people could ask questions live. You could send questions in advance to clubcubase at steinberg.de as well. And we just want to help people kind of get the most out of their software products. We're going to have people just get logged in. And if you want to tell us kind of where you're from, who you are, that's always a great thing to see. So we'll get started in just a couple minutes. We see more people logging in as we do this. So we'll get some people logged in and maybe get started in just a couple minutes. And we'll kind of go through a quick overview of things that are new in Cubase 11. We could ask kind of questions as they come up. I'll try to go through different sections and take a little break and see if there's any burning questions. But so it'll be slightly different format than usual. And if you haven't attended a live hangout before, this will be available to watch afterwards, probably about within an hour of the event ending. So we'll just kind of do this today so I could maybe wrap up my Friday on time for once. So it'll be nice, but we're excited to show you Cubase 11. And I'm sure probably a lot of people have seen some of the videos that we've done. So hopefully, there's a lot of exciting features. We know that there is lots of people that our activation server got, completely overwhelmed with the response. So this is by far the fastest, rate of updates that we've never seen kind of this speed of updates before. So it kind of overwhelmed our license server. We realized that was kind of a nuisance. And, it's a bummer to roll out such an exciting new version and have kind of the license activation not be able to keep up and add to a lot of confusion. So just on behalf of the company, I'm sure, I know everyone feels badly about that, but from what I've seen today, most people seem to be getting their activations. I think what they had done was actually kind of would stop selling for a little bit, let the licenses get caught up, and then put it back online. But it seems like most of the hiccups are done. It's a bummer when you buy something, you can't use it and you're excited. So, I know Steinberg feels very badly about that. It was big topics of discussion. So just wanted to put that out there. So we'll maybe get started in another minute or two. All right. So we have 232 people live. That's awesome. All right, so so we see a lot of people that we're on. All right, so we see Ambient Dave back. That's good to see you, Dave. We've missed you. We also see Vinny Sabatino's back. All right. He said he was in a hospital, so it's good. All right. So, um, and like many of you during kind of pandemic time, my family is at home, so you may hear my wife kind of working directly above me. She's on conference calls throughout the day. My son is kind of doing a school thing, so he's not actually here. So I think we might be able to get through um, without too much interruptions. But let's go ahead and get started. All right, so there's a lot of new and exciting things with Cubase 11, and there's a lot of things that may not be so apparent. And I may not index this particular demonstration because I want people to kind of see the whole thing in focus as opposed to just kind of looking at particular features. But let's go ahead. So on a Windows platform, for people that were running like 4K monitors, Cubase is really well set up to do like 100% or 200%. So what we've enabled is a variable DPI scaling support. So, and this is kind of a big undertaking, so now you could run 125, 150, or 175% for your scaling. And many times plugins don't actually, some plugins that are not high DPI savvy will actually not kind of work in high DPI resolution. So if you actually go to kind of the upper right hand corner of a particular plugin, so let's say if I wanted to come here, and this isn't on the Mac platform, which is what I'm currently using here, but you'll see just a little function in the plugin. So I think maybe the curve EQ may not be, but you'll see like this little function window on the right hand side on a Windows platform, and then you could drop down there, and that could have kind of an auto scaling feature for plugins which don't offer it. On the Mac side, we are taking advantage of the metal graphics. So if you have that support on your Mac, a lot of the screen redraws will kind of automatically be taken care of by the hardware. So you should see a pretty significant performance increase with responsiveness of the graphics on the Mac OS. Some little things that change, and some of these little things can make a big difference, especially with file management. So when you go to a new project, it used to be, and I've spent many times in Hangouts, telling people to switch to prompt for project location when you define the folder, when a project is actually going to be created, as opposed to kind of the default, which will go into like your music folder on your Mac or PC. So this is the default state. So as you go to start a project, it's going to ask you to prompt for the project location so that you could define the actual folder for the project manually. So that you'll kind of take ownership of where the files are going to. One of the things that we see is when diagnosing problems is if you go to preferences, you could enable, I think it's under general, this usage logging. So what this will allow you to do is if you have kind of a repeatable instability, this will allow you to keep a report of kind of what you did going up to what causes an instability. And this way you could send that as a diagnostic report to Steinberg, and they could, greatly expedite kind of the whole process of being able to resolve issues if needed, or what's causing a particular issue. If we have kind of a divided track list scenario, so let's say I am here and I wanted to have maybe my video track at the top, and I have my divided track list. Sometimes it would be hard to determine what was kind of the actual area of focus between the upper zone and the lower zone. So as we click here, we see this little dotted line on the right-hand side, and this will indicate that this is kind of an inactive zone. So when I click at the top where we see a solid line, we can see that that's going to be kind of the focused area. When I click in the bottom and we see kind of the broken dotted lines here, that indicates that is not the active zone. So we could just, very easily deal with that. So, and if we wanted to, just look, so I'll put my video back into my folder track. Okay, some of the, some of the different windows have been updated for a more modern look and a more modern appearance. So I will go ahead and we could go to your device setup window. So now the audio system is at the top, probably what most people will actually utilize that for. When we click on like the plus sign to add controllers, there's also been some more detailed paid, some more detail kind of getting with all the latest Yukon controllers. So if you wanted to just kind of add your Yukon controller, if you have it installed, so you could set up, so there's kind of enhanced Yukon support with version 11, so you have compatibility with all the latest controllers that are kind of utilizing that particular protocol. When we go to our audio connections window, this is another window that's been updated. So as we wanted to kind of look at it, and again, the intention is for it to be a more modern look, kind of in the same theme as kind of, as we've kind of been rolling out over the last few years since version 10. Going through new content. So as we wanted to go through, there's, don't underestimate a lot of the content availability. So if you wanted to go to like the Bloom library, this will give you some different like vocals. So I'm going to so as we wanted to have different vocal samples.
What dimension now? We don't talk. Are we here alone? Where is home? Are we there yet? Must be.
And let's say another one of the libraries will be Dance Floor Tech House. So this will kind of be what it sounds like. So looking for just different inspirations of ideas. We'll go through some. And if you want to do beats, you could just kind of audition through your different loops. And these are all royalty free for your different loops. Moving on, we could say we wanted to go to Hard Knocks. So as we wanted to, some more kind of like hip hop type content. So, but not just beats, but all sorts of different content that will come with Cubase. So let's take a look. So after Hard Knocks, we could have Lo-Fi Dreams, which is also kind of more hip hop oriented. So different ambiances. So lots of great content to work with there. There's going to be a Night Calls, and this will be kind of like 80s synth lines. So you could do kind of your 80s retro, your 80s retrospective, and Noir, which is a really, fantastic library. I think Robert Dudzik did this one. So very kind of cinematic sound design. And a lot of like different risers. So different sounds like that. So you could drop these into like a sampler track very easily. So So lots of kind of great content to work with there. Some other little smaller things, and we'll get on to some of the bigger themes. If we add an audio track here, so let's say I just added my track and I wanted to go and work with track versions. So I'll just say let's duplicate a track version here a couple times. And when kind of working with track versions, often you see the name here, kind of like the actual track version, like we say, V1, ID2, ID3. And if we don't want to, sometimes that could be a little confusing. So we could actually just choose to show the name in the list, or if that's kind of unnecessary, and we could just hide the track version name. So if you do a lot of work with track versions, that's really a great way to work with. And we'll get into also just a quick thing that we'll look at is going to be working with markers. So as I wanted to see my markers in my project, so let's say I have my marker here, we could right click on the marker tracks and we could say show the active marker track. And then what this is going to do is show the marker lines. So regardless of kind of where I am in the project, I could just have different markers. So if I say, okay, we're going to take this marker track and I want to just, I'll not add. So let's say in this marker track, I just wanted to add a whole slew of markers. And now at this point, we could say, let's show, we'll just make it off. And then we'll say, okay, show the active marker track or show all marker tracks. And then you could see the marker tracks kind of indicated vertically throughout the entire project. So stuff like that can make a lot of sense as we start working. Now, one of the things that we wanted to do also is pay a lot of, I'll just take a quick break and look in on chat field, see if we're doing okay before we move on to kind of our next theme of some MIDI editing. Okay, so we had kind of a big theme that we wanted to do with MIDI editing because we did some different previews for some artists and high profile users, and one of the things that we heard repeatedly was, like, especially from composers, is that they actually live in the key editor. This is like their 21st century music score, and we come here and this is what they see and how they envision music. So some of the things that we wanted to do to make this a little more palatable for people is, to speed up workflows pretty significantly. So as we work with this, a lot of times with different virtual instruments, we could have where we double click and we could open up, if you have like an instrument like Halion or Halion Sonic, Pad Shop, Retrolog, like a VST 3.5 instrument, we could draw in note-based MIDI controllers. But a lot of people that were kind of starting in Cubase for the very first time, one of the things that they wanted to do is to be able to, instead of opening up the note expression editor, was to just be able to double click to delete notes. So at this point, this little icon here, this little E that we see at the top in the toolbar, we could deactivate that. So now as I double click on a note, it'll just delete the note. So I'll undo that. So I wanted to now come here and say, okay, we have now, with one single tool, I could hold down my Alter Option key to draw a note in. I could click on a note with the Alter Option key to adjust, to split the note. I could grab the edges with my selection tool to resize. And I could double click just to get rid of notes, all without switching a single tool to work with. So that is kind of sped things up. I think in version 9.5, we introduced, Bezier curves for working with automation, and unfortunately didn't make it initially into MIDI continuous controllers. So that has kind of changed with this version. So we could, as we want to enter in different MIDI CCs. We could choose to put these into kind of a step or ramp. So I'm going to switch to my pencil tool here, and now I'll just put in 2 values, and now it'll just ramp. So I don't have to kind of draw in a bunch of kind of unnecessary points. So I could now, as we do this, it's going to ramp up and down like so. And if we wanted to work with curves within this particular editor, all I had to do is just kind of go as I hover between 2 points of a curve there. I could just go to the middle and we could adjust the curves accordingly. So this way we could have all of your different curves handled very efficiently. Sometimes copying data from one part to another part, like MIDI CC data from one part to another part, would kind of merge the data instead of replacing it. So when let's say I have 2 different string parts that are kind of grouped together for editing. So I have like a high string part and let's say a low string part. So my high string part is in orange, my low string part is in green, and I could switch between these 2 different views. So if I wanted to take my modulation data that I've written in this particular high part and have this, let's say for violin 1, and I want my cellos to have the same exact expression, what we could do now is select our high part. I will come over here, right click in this area. We'll choose to select all events on the lane. So when we come here, I'm going to select all the events and then right click again, copy. I'm going to switch to my lower part. And as I do that, I'm going to choose paste at origin. And now we have matched continuous controllers between the different parts. So you could seamlessly switch between those and have kind of the same expression that you probably painstakingly have set up. There's also been some enhancements with working with, poly pressure. So now if I had a note and we had polyphonic pressure where we could have kind of different CCs on a note by note basis, I could, if I'm looking at my poly pressure at this point, we could choose to say, okay, now I want to see it on the poly pressure for this particular note. We could see the notes indicated there. So on my A note, I want to have a different level of poly pressure, and my F sharp, a different. So this way you could actually kind of just see the notes available and be able to toggle and have that become kind of the active lane as you're doing it. And as you select the note here, the poly pressure lane could automatically update as well. The scale assistant, and this is something that, for those who have watched the Hangouts for a while, this is a, very common kind of feature request that people had, was the ability to kind of set scales. And we wanted to kind of, take it to another level. So within the MIDI key editor, we could see our scale edits here. So we could use our, if we wanted to do, something very simple, like, okay, I wanted to define my scale, I could say, okay, this is going to be in G major. We could extract the scale from the chord track. We have scale suggestion. So Cubase could actually do an analysis of the part and automatically give you scale suggestion. So, G major or an A blues 1 scale. So we have those different options. So we have some of these different options right here. So that, and if we wanted to get really precise, like when we're doing kind of our previews, composer Trevor Morris, wonderful composer, we have the ability to actually add your own scales. So he's like, I would love to have like a Bartok half diminished scale, but I have a hard time getting it under my fingers. So at this point, you could add your own custom scale. And I spoke to another composer friend of mine who's so excited because he thinks he came up with his own unique scale and he's using that for pieces. And it's like just really interesting. So you could have your own custom scale as you work with this. So let's say I have different MIDI notes like in my project here, and some of these notes may be in key or may not be. we could choose to just quantize pitches, and that would take every note that was out of key and move it to within the scale that we've defined. As we do editing, we could just enable snap pitch editing. So if I wanted to move particular notes, like with my up down arrows, that would just automatically keep all of the notes directly within the scale. So once that's turned off, this will just go chromatically. But I have my snap pitch correction. Now it's going to stay within G major. And one of the things that's kind of cool is this ability to do like a snap live input. So we could kind of do this in a bit of a convoluted fashion before. Like if we wanted to do, on input through the input transformer. But now I could come over here, we'll say, let's snap our live input. And as we want to work with this, I'm going to say, let's just put it into like step entry. And I'm going to just open up my virtual keyboard here. So, and I'm going to say we have step entry for, and I'll put in 16th note triplets. So as I would just kind of use my MIDI controller, I could just be able to kind of just draw in like a harp glissando and have that automatically just kind of work directly and have it go directly to all the right scales without having to worry about that at all. So being able to edit those different aspects, can really kind of speed up your workflow with doing like, really complex string runs. You could just kind of, paint it in, and it's going to be assured that it's going to be the actual right pitches and going to be musically correct. People had wanted the ability to be able to, I think other programs may call it track folding, but to kind of filter the notes. So if we have a lot of notes, we could see all the notes within the MIDI specification within the editor. But let's say if I only wanted to see notes that were in the scale, I could activate this icon up here, or say show only pitches that have events on them and hide everything else. And one mouse click, all notes will be visible. So, if you wanted to work with accidentals, or you wanted to be assured that it's going to only work within the scales, or that it's going to work with only notes that are, the pitches that are there or within scales, or see all of the notes visible just that easily. One of the things that people had wanted for a very long time was the ability of taking, we had people that were kind of going back and forth between the project window view and this view, especially if they needed to edit a tempo or see a marker. So we've included kind of the global inclusion. So I could come here and we'll just introduce some of these kind of one at a time here. So if I wanted to, we could now have our video track directly within our key editor. So if I wanted to see my video track, if I wanted to see the chord track, and these functions are also editable. So if I wanted this to be a G major 7th chord instead, we can edit that. If I want to see my time signature track, so if we look at this, we could say, okay, we're in 6/8 time. I have a transpose track, my arranger track. So if I want to see kind of my song structure, I could see that within my arranger. I could also see my markers, and we could have up to 10 marker tracks. So you see that as the marker is added, and we have that preference from before where we have we can see the markers kind of vertically throughout the scale, throughout the edit window. And as we come over here, if I want to see my tempo, so I say, oh, this is great. I just wanted the tempo to ramp up and slow down kind of right there very easily. You could do your tempo changes. You could also see kind of a ruler track. So even if I come here, let's say for my ruler track, I could just say, I wanted the time format for this. I'll just switch it to time code. So now that I'm within my editor, I could see SMPTE time code and bars and beats. If you wanted to, like a lot of times, I will put in the lyrics as a marker track. So This way you could navigate and see the actual lyric as you're doing MIDI editing. So, this word comes here and I just will type in, directly into the marker tracks. So all these could be visible. And if you wanted to hide them, it's just a simple mouse click right there to hide or show all of your global tracks. So you could have up to 10 marker tracks visible. So those are some of the things within the MIDI key editor that are some of the enhancements with that. And then now we'll go ahead and move on to the sampler track. So go ahead and activate this particular project. So this was kind of a major overhaul for the sampler track in this particular version. So let's say if I wanted to, we could drag media like audio from our project window, or even just a MIDI part that's routed to a virtual instrument, and we could add it to our sampler track. And now immediately I could, as soon as I've dragged that into the sampler track, I can play that sound, immediately right there. But let's say, some of the things that people would have kind of an issue with is as we would play, like, if I dragged it in, if I wanted this to be louder or if I wanted to normalize the audio, we would have to kind of normalize it outside of the sampler track and then drag it back in. But now there's a normalize function directly within the sampler track. So we could see, so we could do that very easily. If I wanted to choose like different start or end positions, I could just kind of select right here with my range tool and just crop to trim the samples as we want it. If I also wanted to take kind of a different approach, let's say with a drum loop. Now, one of the things that's also been updated is kind of the graphic appearance, because some of the functions, especially in the previous versions of the sampler track, would actually be kind of really hard to see if the functions were inactive. So all these are more obviously active or inactive, but the kind of the headers still remain visible so that you could see it. So as I play back from this particular drum track, I'll just come here and I'll have this particular sound just, so I'll just have this as my root key, and as we play. Now, something else that's been incorporated is different quality playback engines. So if you want to have high, best, or extreme. So now as I wanted to do different pitch shifting, so if I played this drum loop up an octave, we would now have that drum loop playback at twice the speed and twice the pitch. And if I do it down an octave, it's half speed and half the pitch. So we could have different higher quality algorithms with that. And if I wanted to activate the audio warp, what this would allow me to do is to come over here and just, have the length maintain the same length of the sample, but just change the pitch. So as I play different pitches, it's not going to slow down or speed up the audio. So if you want to try, different interesting sound design functions, you could do that very easily there. One common request and just came up last week on a hangout that we did is people wanted the ability to slice directly within the sampler. So we could do our slicing based on transients and grids, or have it done manually. So as I wanted to just kind of drag this out directly to my sampler track, at this point, we could just take that particular, so each of the slices are now triggerable directly there. And if I wanted to just kind of take this particular sample part and just kind of change up the pattern, and of course I'll do this scientifically. It's not random at all. Okay. So I could take that same basic drum loop and just have it automatically, you know, maintain the same groove, the same sounds, but just have a variation on it. So that kind of being able to kind of slice and dice drum loops and kind of, you know, construct and reconstruct them is a very cool thing to do. Now, if I wanted to kind of have that same functionality, let's say for a vocal part, at this point I could just open up my virtual keyboard and I'll just have this.
No time to hesitate, it's all been done. You wanna have it, you can get enough.
So if I wanted to do like different vocal chops, you know, you have an A and a B setting. So on my B setting here, what I want to do is to actually, I just manually put in slices. So I could just say,
you wanna hesitate,
so you could just have someone kind of improvise a quick song.
You wanna hesitate, enough. You wanna hesitate enough.
So you could take like a different performance and be able to just kind of, you know, take different snippets and play around with it musically in a really interesting manner. So, you know, doing vocal chops, you know, just having someone improvise different ideas and be able to reassemble it musically and played slice audio. And it's not necessarily just for drums or vocals, you know, violin performance, a guitar performance, a guitar solo, stuff like that. You could do some really cool things. We've also had some enhancements with kind of the monophonic playback capabilities. So let's say if I have kind of, maybe I want to do some kind of 808 glide type things. So we've introduced we have your glide speed here. So if you want it to be, you know, when put into monophonic mode here, and I hit the second note, it'll kind of glide up, and we could adjust how fast or how slow it glides up. So if I want it to be faster, and there's also kind of a finger mode. So if I play them and don't hold the first note down, and they're separated, not played back in monophonic, so it won't glide. But now if I hold down the first note, and one of the things that's interesting is as I play the second note, you notice that the sample will re-trigger from the beginning of the sample. So if we watch this, when I play the second note, it's going to start the sample playback from the beginning of the sample. But if I wanted the sample to play through continuously, all I would have to do is enable these two little music modes here for the legato mode. And as I play the second note, it's going to continue to play through the sample, but just change the pitch of the sample. And we could also do some interesting stuff. I had my good friend Daryl Pearson. I had this weird request for him about 6 weeks ago where I'm like, can you just sing something for me that's just one single note? And so he just, you know, I think he took time out from a Justin Timberlake session or something and sent me this little file. So
I am singing this phrase for Greg so that he can get what he needs accomplished with this program. This is a recording.
Okay, so now that I've placed this into legato mode and musical mode, I'm going to hold down the first note.
I am singing this phrase for Greg so that he can
get what he needs accomplished with this program. This is a recording.
And at that point, you could just, take any audio in any sample and be able to kind of play with it, experiment, and compose from existing audio in a very musical way using your MIDI controller. Now, we saw how we could do previously, like when we have our sampler track here and we wanted to play, let's say, like a synthesizer sound. So this is the MIDI note that we had dragged in. Now we want to kind of change up the characteristics of that particular sample. So I will come over here and we could enable the filters. So we're going to have, 6 different filter types, multiple filter shapes, all present within the particular filter. So I'm going to come over here. And one of the things I want to do is just to click on this cutoff key follow. So now as I play lower notes, the filter will kind of close and it will open up as the pitch goes higher. So we could kind of listen here. So that way you could kind of just change. And as the filter goes up, then you could just have change the sound just based on the pitch. The one thing that people wanted, significantly was, the ability of having LFOs or like how to kind of have the sound change automatically in a musical way. So what I want to do now is we could have 2 different LFOs. These could be on the pitch section, the filter, or the amplifier section. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of just zoom out and we'll take a look at our LFO. And one of the things that's cool is as, let's say I play a note and I adjust the, let's say I adjust my actual filter here, you can see kind of the waveform change. So you're able to kind of have, a lot of control over the sound. So let's say if I wanted to assign this to an LFO now. So I'm going to assign this to, there's 2 different LFOs that we could toggle back and forth. And you could have multiple parameters sent to a particular LFO, but with the same settings. So I'm going to adjust the LFO parameter up here. Okay, so we see kind of our LFO here. So if I wanted to adjust the rate of it to be slower or faster, I could adjust kind of the phase. And what this will actually show is like, does it start in the middle? Do I want to start at the top and have it go down, or the bottom and go up? So you could adjust that directly there. There's also different filter shapes. And if we wanted this synchronized to tempo, all we would have to do is we could say, okay, let's just do our tempo sync. And we will see our values change here to musical values. So you can say, okay, I want this to be, 8th notes. And one of the things I remember talking to, different composers, and we're like, oh, we love LFOs, but we want them to last really long because we may just want a sound to slowly evolve over time, and everyone just has maybe like 2 measures. So here we could actually have the LFO go for 16 measures. So that way you could have that kind of natural musical evolution where you want something just to kind of slowly change. You could do that quite easily. So we're taking kind of just this one simple sound, and let's adjust, go to LFO 2 for, let's say, my panning. So now, and I click on LFO 2, I could have different rates here. So taking just a very simple sound and being able to Let's say I'll knock it up an octave. And let's say at this point with the sampler track, I want to be able to, use my EQs. So if I wanted to, and different effects and my channel strip, we're going to have, the ability to run all these different functions directly from, within the audio. And when I want to save this as a preset, all I really have to do is just click here and save a track preset. And then I could use that in any other project that I wanted to. It'll be recalled with all the settings, all the LFOs, the samples, and everything that's going to be set. And you could just drag that in. Now, another thing that people wanted was the ability to, I painstakingly set up all of my sounds. And as I start working with it, I may want to keep all of the settings identical, but maybe I just want a different sample to start with. So let's say I have this kind of as my sample. So as we play, one single note. So I could go to my media bay and I will just take a completely different sound, drag that and drop that in. And if I do that with, if I should have done my padlock first. So if let's say I have my filter set up here, operator error on my part. So now that I have, let's say everything configured, my LFOs, I could just drag a sample in with this padlock and all of those settings will be preserved and it will just replace the sample itself, but everything else will be maintained. Now, we also have a lot of other different sampling tools, and this is incredibly fast and easy for great sound design. But some of the other sampling tools that we have available within the Steinberg family of tools, we could also just take from our sampler track and export it to Groove Agent SE, Halion. So if we wanted to make our own sample libraries that we could sell to end users. We could go to Pad Shop 2, or, one of the new things is also directly to Backbone, kind of our drum resynthesizer. So once you have everything kind of set up here with the, the sampler track, you could take it to the next level or just have that kind of immediate fluidity of being able to, take audio and be able to manipulate it in very musical modes. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and we'll take a look at some audio plugins next. So there's a lot of great plugin enhancements. So as we want to start looking at some of our plugins, some of the plugins will have, some different GUI enhancements. So, as we have updated plugins to be more kind of modern looking or more with a high DPI scaling. So we can see our mixer delay and our test tone generator have been updated visually to see those. If we want to also say, look at the channel strip, one of the things that people would want it to see, we have kind of the maximizer plugin that was introduced, I think in 10, with a new kind of algorithm for that. And some of the plugins like our compressor, we could see kind of a full plugin view within the channel strip. So this has been added with the maximizer plugin directly in the channel strip view, which is really handy because this is one that, seeing the meters on could be very critical when working with it. And some of the other plugins have had some pretty significant updates. So let's say if I want to start off with the Imager plugin. So, there's been kind of stereo enhancing plugins for a while, but sometimes where a lot of them fail is you can make the mix sound wider, but as you're working with it, you may actually find that the low end gets really kind of floppy. So let's say I'll just kind of take this particular project here. And so what this is a multi-band imager. So as we look at this, I could take particular frequencies. So if I want to take my low end, my low mids, and make those really wide, this is when it could get a bit floppy. But a lot of times we may want our low end to be kind of very center and almost very mono-like. So I could just take the low end and just tighten that up by just narrowing it within the stereo spectrum. Then I could take my high frequencies, so my high mids, and let's make that a little wider. And we'll go right over here. Let's say my ultra highs, and you could solo each band. And you could change the frequency cutoff point as well. So we'll just kind of turn that off. So it's a beautiful sounding track before, and now you can kind of get that little bit of extra energy, that width where you need it, directly using the Imager plugin, so in multi-band mode. So when you need like a particular string part to kind of pop out a little, you know, you could do that very easily using the Imager plugin. The frequency EQ, which is a beast of an EQ plugin, has also been pretty significantly updated. So it is 8 bands of linear phase EQ. You could choose whether you want the EQ to be on the stereo source, or if you want it to be just on the mid side. So if you wanted to EQ the middle part of the panning spectrum, or kind of the sides, kind of the outer edges, or if you wanted to EQ left and right independently. One thing that a lot of people miss is as you adjust the EQ for the frequency, you could actually kind of see the piano keyboard as you adjust, but you could say, you know, this song is in the key of G. So I want to go to the frequencies and just type in G4, and that will take you to that particular key. You know, this is a very surgical EQ. So if I wanted to come here, we could just audition only what we're adjusting. So I hear exactly what I'm affecting with this particular band of EQ as I do it. Now, people had asked for a long time, it's like, oh, it'd be so great if we could have kind of a dynamic mode on the EQs, meaning that I could apply dynamics just in this particular EQ curve here. So let's say if, you know, I just want dynamics right here in that particular frequency range on a particular instrument. So we could enable dynamics mode and click here to switch back and forth. So now I could apply dynamics just on that particular EQ band. So as we come over here, we could see everything just kind of laid out, so you could just toggle freely back and forth between EQ and dynamics. And if you don't want to toggle, because, you know, sometimes seeing all the different parameters can be hard in a graphic user interface, you could click here, and we can now see for this band, I could adjust the EQ and see the dynamics. I go to a different band, and we could turn these on, enable the different settings for each band. So you could kind of work how you want to work with that particular plugin. So, you know, a new dynamic mode on the frequency EQ kind of, you know, was very surgical, but it's kind of almost like surgery with a rusty knife to now surgery with a laser going on with the new settings. And one of the new plugins that was introduced is one called Squasher. And this is designed to be kind of a up-down compressor. So this is often going to be used in, like, you know, dance music. So I just have kind of a quick project here where this Squasher is going to be affecting like the kick. And this Squasher is going to affect the rest of the mix. And we'll kind of turn these on and off so you could hear it. So the squasher is a multi-band up-down compressor. We could have, if you wanted to work this in kind of parallel mode, so we could, just kind of come directly over here. You have your mix, you have a drive per band, you could adjust the frequencies. So let's go ahead and take a quick listen to it. So, a lot of times, this type of compression is used, in dance music and EDM to make like particular, synths kind of pop out of the mix, or, kicks to give you that extra thump. So we'll go ahead and play just a little bit here. So I'll just put it on the kick. So my mouse is acting up on me. So my mouse is acting weird. Let me see if I can get this. Just open up my trackpad really quickly. See if I get my mouse back. Bear with me. Sorry about this. Okay, so some reason just go ahead and, so my left mouse button is now acting as my right mouse button. Let me just, I'm going to switch my computer keyboard. Bear with me just a second. Okay, so I think my keyboard is now... Okay, just reset that. Sorry about that. That was kind of weird. All right, so we'll come here. So let's open up... let's say our squasher. So this will be on kind of the full mix, and then this track will be on my kick and snare. So I'll just rewind just a little bit here so I can get a sense. So now on the kick. And I'll just bypass that on the kick. So just kind of put it on, use one of the presets. And let's say I want that synth hook to kind of pop out. So this is on kind of the full mix, and this is the kick and snare. Put it back on the kick. So off the kick. On the full mix without kick. Kick it on and kick. So, it's that type of plug-in that could really just kind of make, and while it's kind of intended for dance and EDM, I've used it on jazz pieces and kind of very Americana acoustic pieces. And it's, worked amazingly well for that. One of the most interesting aspects is the sidechain capability. So if we wanted to, we have, we see each band can be sidechained. But when we go to the sidechaining, within one single plugin, we could have 3 independent sidechain inputs. So I could have, if this was on my mix, I could have the kick drive this band, the snare drive this, and the vocal be the trigger input for this particular band. And so I'm not, I think that might be unique to have one plugin with multiple sidechain inputs. And we thought, okay, if we could do 3 for Squasher, wouldn't it be cool if we could, have that kind of also for the frequency. So since the frequency has 8 bands of EQ, at this point, we could have 8 independent sidechains. So each band of the EQ can have its own sidechain input source. So that gets to be I'll call it very German, with kind of the level of detail and the concepts of that. One other little minor editing thing that I'll point out, and this is kind of a good project to do it, and this would probably be, like a small little thing that we would do just to kind of speed up editing. So let's say I have like a lot of background vocals stacked here, and a lot of us know that we could use the range selection tool and do different edits or cuts on like all of those different tracks. So if I hit Shift X, I could do that. And now when you hit Shift X, that will automatically select all of the tracks that you just split. So before, especially if we said, okay, I wanted to come here, I want to do an edit there, and I would hit Shift plus X, I would have to go back after making the cut and then select each individual element within the cut. So now we could just come right there and have those selected. And this is also really handy because now you could just choose to color, So I wanted to take, these parts here with my range selection tool, Shift X, and, this is where danger comes in the score or whatever. And you could just colorize them just because those different elements are actually selected. As we want to go back and we'll show one other plugin, which isn't actual kind of audio processor plugin, but it's going to be more just of, for metering. And, metering has become kind of more essential as we work, because, people are very cognizant of different loudness levels. So one of the new plugins that's been incorporated it's a new plugin category called Analyzer. So when you go to our Analyzer section, we have a plugin here called Supervision. And when we open it up, it kind of looks, like a meter. So we'll have just, like a simple meter. And I'm just going to put this on my master bus here. So you'll probably open up, kind of like this. But if you stop there, you're missing kind of all of the goodness of this particular plugin, because it's not just a VU meter. It's actually a suite of 18 different meters that could be accommodated. And one instance of Supervision could hold up to 9 different meters. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of the different settings that we could do. So let's say we have our level. And we could choose kind of different points. So if I wanted to just, do metering on the middle part of the panning spectrum or the sides, or my left, right. If we have this on a particular channel, we could have it assume the channel colors. For each of the meters, we could go directly to our little settings cogwheel. And I can say I want this to be digital, DIN, CAT system 20, 1412. And I wanted to, show true peaks, or I want it to be RMS. How long do I want it to hold? Do I want to see like meters based on scale? And those can be set into preferences. And if I wanted this to be loudness instead, and we could kind of just reposition vertically, or more vertical orientation. So if I wanted to be loudness or loudness units full scale, if I wanted to be kind of peaking at -23 or -14, we could do that. And let's jump over to like maybe our spectrum curve. And here, as I hover over, you could actually see which frequencies are kind of peaking in real time. so you don't have to kind of imagine what exact frequencies that you may want to adjust with an EQ. If I wanted to go to a spectrum bar, and as I'm in my spectrum bar, we could just say I wanted this to be 3 bands per octave or 24 bands per octave. And again, you could choose, different coloring schemes if you want. Any of the meters, you could also just right tap, and that would freeze the meter at that particular position. So let's say if I wanted this to be a spectrum intensity, so you can see what frequencies with their intensities. Or let's go to a spectrogram. One of my best friends who's a blind mastering engineer, this is how he perceives music as he listens to it. And here we could have different color schemes. So if you want to be light or plasma, magma, a dark mode, more black and white looking. And let's go ahead and take a look at chromogram. So again, kind of frequency dependent view. Let's go to our phase scope. And here we could say I want this to be dots or maybe an envelope. We could have kind of an automatic zoom, but we could also adjust the zoom. So if you want to do that type of stuff, and let's look at maybe the panorama, so we can see exactly what's going on panning wise. And again, same type of configuration for if you want that to be dots. Let's go to our multi-panorama, so we can see where it is on the, kind of the panning spectrum and the frequency intensity. Say our correlation, so we can see a multi-correlation, and this will work kind of horizontally or vertically, depending how you have it set. We'll have different surround and ambisonics meters, also an oscilloscope, wave scope. So even if you just kind of play MIDI notes in there, you could just have it figure it out. If you want to see like a wave circle. And also just time meter. And you could come here and pick, okay, I want this to be beats, samples, time code. Now, if I wanted to start building up my own meters, let's say I'll take this full screen. As I'm here, I'll just say, we'll see these little in the upper right-hand corners where I could say I want to divide those 2 meters vertically. So the bottom meter, I wanted this to be my spectrum bar. And now we could also divide kind of horizontally depending on what is selected here. So you can say, okay, now I want this as my phase scope. I wanted this as my panorama. And let's say here, I want to take this meter. Let's make this loudness right to just to the right of that. And let's make this a spectrogram. So again, any of these meters you could right click, but if I double click, that meter will go full screen. Double click again, it'll be tucked away. So there's just a couple presets I made. So let's say, okay, I want this as my meter view, or I wanted this. So all sorts of great, beautiful presets that it comes with. So I think many people will just be running this on a completely independent, brand new actual display. So I just run it in my control room. So I could come here and just kind of switch between my meters and be able to see everything. And, you know, not only does it look really cool and impressive, but it's going to actually, you know, give you kind of great insight. And one comment I saw yesterday on one of the videos was, you know, how's that help me write music? You know, is that going to help me write a better song? It's not really intended for that, but it's going to show you where maybe, you know, different elements of your mix are not working. So I could run that as an insert on every single track on my master, or, you know, so if I wanted to put that phase scope as an insert on every single track, run it in my control room, run it on my master fader. Incredibly powerful metering, just directly inside of Cubase. A couple years ago, Steinberg kind of took over, you know, distribution of spectral layers, and you know, this is kind of a really scary program to work with because, you know, what you could do, kind of with audio, could be pretty frightening with this. And there's some, you know, and we communicate to spectral layers via, you know, kind of a communication protocol called ARA2. So as we work with ARA2, this is going to allow us to kind of take our audio from Cubase and hand it over into another, often a kind of a specialized editing environment, and be able to have that audio kind of go back and forth. So if I wanted this to go directly to spectral layers, I could go to my audio menu, and we could choose extensions, and you could see all of your spectral layers. So there's a Spectral Layers Pro and Elements, and with Cubase, you get Spectral Layers 1. And this is kind of a cut down version, but still very powerful for some of the stuff we could do. So with this file, I could also just launch the editor from the extension right here. So I'm going to take the sample editor and just take this directly into Spectral Layers. Okay, so now this choice is launched in Spectral Layers. And as we look at this, it kind of looks different at first. You know, most of us are used to kind of this paradigm of being able to see kind of an audio waveform. So in this example, and I just recorded it, and it may be a little confusing because it's going to be my voice as well, but we'll play it back. I was talking, and then let's say we had someone that just kind of like blew into the microphone, but it's a beautiful vocal performance, but there's one annoying breath. Or, you know, I had one recording where, you know, the singer accidentally in this very quiet exposed passage, you know, tapped her, or like I just had a plosive. So if you have that in a recording and you want to get rid of it, but I had a singer and she just tapped the microphone stand with her foot accidentally, and no one else could hear it but me. And it was like nails on a chalkboard. So when we have situations like that, what we could do is, instead of looking at it in kind of our traditional waveform, we could see it, you know, laid out in kind of our frequency view. So we see our frequencies indicated here. And these are our low frequencies, and how we see kind of all these lines. This is an actual, you know, what we're seeing is the harmonic overtone series that's going on. I'm going to switch my view here to the composite view. So this could have these frequencies that kind of pop out, be wider. So let's listen to this, and this, you know, it'll be my voice, a recording of my voice, and there'll be right here just a breath. And you may not hear it if you're just listening to it on your phone, but if you listen with headphones or on speakers, you could probably hear this. But we'll just go ahead and play this. So this is the recording part. You may blow into the microphone accidentally. So instead of having to re-record that, we may want to just isolate those particular frequencies. Now, to zoom in Spectral Layers, we could go into, you know, our actual editor here, and we could use the mouse scroll wheel to zoom in time. And if we go to so this is our time axis, and this will be our frequency axis. So I could zoom in, and let's navigate. So at this point, we could say, okay, this is the breath that I want to get rid of. So we'll just play it again to the microphone axis. So yeah, and you could see that, and you know, if you had like listening to it on speakers, it could be very problematic. So what I want to do is to just select these particular frequencies. Now, to give you kind of even a more interesting perspective, we could just kind of come over here and look at this in kind of our 3D view. So we could, see kind of how the frequencies are related. Again, these are low frequencies. So we could see kind of, how deep or how prominent those particular frequencies are. So I'm going to take my selection tool here and choose an elliptical selection. So at this point, what I want to do is I'm just going to select my breath sound here, and I'll just hit delete a couple times. And what I'm going to do is just kind of take that out. And now as we play, go into the microphone accidentally. So I've just gotten rid of those particular frequencies without affecting the voice. So this way, if you have, you're doing a recording and, there's feedback or someone hits something in the background, a squeaky piano, an acoustic guitar squeak, you could select these particular frequencies and be able to kind of, filter those out and erase them. Now, one of the things, if you're doing this for a lot of different audio files, it could be problematic launching the extension every single time. So if I wanted to go to have, when I click on an audio file, instead of it going to the sample editor directly to spectral layers, I could just click on add event. So as I click on this event, that event is going to be added directly into spectral layers. So if I wanted to go back to this, I don't have to launch kind of the extension every single time. And if I wanted to remove the event, we could just have that event removed from spectral layers and go back to our traditional sample editor. In previous versions of Cubase, when we've incorporated the ARA2, one of the kind of workflow niggles was that you would have to kind of render these settings and this adjustment into spectral layers. You would have, into the audio file itself, you would have to do an audio bounce selection. And sometimes you may have like different edits, like fade ins, fade outs, and you would have to kind of commit to that at that point. So now these changes can be embedded directly into the file without having to do the audio bounce selection. Probably the most exciting aspect of spectral layers as we look at it here, and I'll go back to kind of just a quick full screen view, is we'll just say, so say we have,
Can I tell you that it's too late?
so again, if we wanted to just kind of zoom in, we can see where the vocals come in. We see that harmonic overtone series. So, a common thing, and I was just showing this to a bunch of R&B producers, and they just totally flipped out over this, is if you go to layers, so we have, this is a 2-track mix. So we look at our file, this is all the instruments with our vocals embedded in the vocals. Okay, so, but what I want to do is go to my layer menu, and I'm going to choose unmixed vocals. So I will now just pop right over here, hit OK. It's going to take just, like a 5-minute live recording. So, and this has all sorts of bleed going on in the recording. So we'll just give it a second here. And I'll just kind of take it back down to our lower zone. So we'll go ahead and play. And as I play this, I'm going to go ahead and just mute the vocals. So it's broken the vocals into its own layer. And let's go ahead and solo the vocals. So we've taken the vocals out of a 2-track mix. And even if we think we'll have some harmonies coming up. So that's some.
I don't care about you anyway. No, no, no. I don't care about what you've got. No, no, no.
So now that we have this kind of broken out into layers, we thought it'd be really cool from spectral layers if we could just drag that file out into your project window. And now you'll have your vocals automatically just kind of isolated here.
That there ain't nothing trying.
So I'll mute the music. So, being able to kind of go in, this is almost like baking a cake and saying after the cake is done, you've eaten a couple of slices of the cake, saying, let's take the eggs out of the cake. So, incredibly powerful. And, so this is the version that comes with Cubase. And if you have like Spectral Layers Pro, you could, do, selections based on, the harmonic overtone series. You could have different, noise, like where you could take a noise print that you could select and you could unmix vocals, drums, pianos, and bass from different tracks. So there's even more capabilities. But you see the problems that, you could solve very quickly instead of having to go back and re-record something. And this kind of fluidity of being able to jump from one environment to another is very powerful in Cubase with the Spectral Layers 1. We'll now go back and look at a couple of scoring things because the scoring team has been very busy as well. So let's say I wanted to come look at my piano part in my notation view. So, some people have asked for a while, it's like, okay, we know that Steinberg does Dorco, which is a dedicated, notation program that does some great stuff as well. And it's an amazing notation program. But there's still people that want to kind of toggle back and forth between the two environments. So many people and if you have seen on the Steinberg YouTube channel, there's a great video of Alan Silvestri who does his sequencing in Cubase and delivers all of his parts in Dorco. So we've incorporated some interesting things with his score editor inside of Cubase. So now if we want to come over here, we've introduced support for Smoofle music fonts, and it's a funny sounding word, but it's a standard music font layout. So, Dorco introduced, its own unique bravura font. So it's a beautiful looking font. So now we could actually just say, I could switch from classical to jazz fonts, or if I want it to be Petaluma, which is kind of a bit more real book, or if I wanted to use the bravura font, we could just come right over there. And now we have the same font in Cubase as we do in Dorco. So, this way, if you're used to working with the score here in Dorco or in Cubase, you go to Dorco, you're going to have kind of the consistent look and feel because the same fonts can be applied directly to. One of the things that's been added is kind of a new inspector editor that we could put on the right-hand zone. So we could enable this by clicking on the icon in the upper right-hand corner here. And this is kind of context sensitive. And if you're kind of a Dorco user, this could be similar to kind of the lower zone, like where you select something and you'll see kind of very, context sensitive functions. So let's say I click on the clef. So now I could change the clef. If I wanted to click on, my key signature, I could see my key signature and see other relevant choices. If I click on a note, I could change my note head shape. You could also do scaling of notes. So if you want to do, smaller notes, or you want to do a big note songbook, you could, just have different note scaling options. If I go to the chords, we'll see kind of the similar chord editing functions that we see directly like in the chord track. If I wanted to go to my system text, for the fonts, the font size, if I wanted to go to the bar line, I could just come right over here and incorporate the bars and change that. So anything that I kind of just click on, we could have our different settings. So let's say at this point, like I had let me see if I have one in here. But let's say if I go to my dynamics and I have, a dynamic indicated here, I could just switch the dynamics. And one question we had just on one of the YouTube videos was, oh, it'd be so great if we could have as we put dynamics or crescendos to actually have those change the MIDI playback. And these are under dynamic mappings. So at this point, we could just say, we'll come over here. And when I put this in, I could put it in a mezzo forte and I could double click and we could choose to, change the volume or increase or decrease velocity or send different MIDI controller messages. So we could do that with dynamics mappings. One of the things that's really interesting is you may be kind of in a score editor, and at times you may, want to adjust the velocity of a particular note or adjust the length of a note without having to go back to kind of a very familiar graphical based environment. So what we're going to be able to do if we wanted to do this from within a score editing environment is enable the overlay settings here. So now I will just kind of move my mouse over different, parts here. And I could now, we see this V setting. So this would allow me to adjust the velocity of these particular notes without having to go into my key editor. If I wanted to adjust the length of the actual MIDI notes, I could adjust here. Or if I just select, let's say if I wanted these notes to hold out longer in the bottom. So we have the M, which will show you the actual, length of the MIDI note or just the display length. So if I wanted this to notate differently, I could adjust the length. We could see these kind of adjust. So I could adjust the length of the notes and how they display in time versus how they actually notate. So this way, if we need a note to last just a little bit longer for that sample library to kind of get the full note and realize kind of the full sound that we're looking for from that particular instrument and sample in the library, we could just, come right over here and just tweak your different notes. So as you hover over, we could adjust your velocity as well as your display length and your actual MIDI note length here. So very easy to kind of, now graphically edit while in your score editor without having to toggle back and forth between different windows and different views. One of the aspects that people, we talked about our film composers earlier, where, they live in the MIDI key editor. And what happens often is their assistants live in the export audio mixdown. There's always a plethora of different files to work. So as we want to be able to deliver different formats and different scales, or different formats and different configurations. This gets to be, and it's a part of the process that no one really gets paid for. So you're incredibly happy with, you composed it, you've edited it, you've mixed it, everything is sounding beautiful in your particular computer. And so let's say I just have a little bit, kind of a composition going on. So now what I want to do is to deliver this for different file formats and different purposes. So when we go to our export audio mixdown, excuse me, we can have some different options. And one of the new additions, and probably the most powerful addition, is this concept of the export queue. So we have different naming conventions that we could use. So if we wanted to have, the project name, the name of the track, or free text, if we wanted to. Another very important thing in the path is that we could choose to have all of our mixdowns go into a separate, distinct audio folder, like a mixdown folder. so that, if you're mixing down a vocal file and it's going into 6 different formats, that you won't have 6 different vocal files with, perhaps the same name in the same project, or in the same folder when you're archiving. So let's say, here's some scenarios that I heard from some of our previews with different artists and composers. The director, they want to hear the score right now. They're driving, down the Pacific Coast Highway, and they want to hear it in their car. Can you send them an MP3 file? Okay, so I will come over here, and every time that we set up a scenario, we could save it as a preset. So we'll say, okay, and once we have that scenario set, we'll say, okay, let's add it to the queue. So-and-so wants to listen to it on a ride home in their CD player in their car. So let's go ahead and burn a 16-bit interleaved 44.1 file. So let's go ahead and add that. The video editor needs a WAV file that is split channels, and they need it to be 24-bit 48K. So we'll come over here. Let's say we have multiple cues within the project here as well. So let's say, I'll close this just for a second. And let's say we have a marker track, and we have multiple cues done within a particular marker. So I will come here, and let's say we have a couple of cycle markers. And these are all different parts of the song or different cues. So now when I go to my export audio mixdown, we can say we need to take a 24-bit 48K interleaved mixdown of these, and we could do it based on the cycle markers. So let's add that to our queue. Now we need to come over and adjust let's do some multi-channel export. So I want to make stems. So I wanted to include all my output channels, my effects channels, instrument tracks, VST instruments, and audio channels. So at this point, someone else is going to be mixing it. So I want to send them no processing on all the files. I don't want to embed the EQs, the inserts, no effect sends, no master effects. And I want my mono files to be exported as mono, my stereo files to be exported as stereo. So to maintain their channel width. So at this point, we just choose disabled, and let's go ahead and add that to the queue. So let me adjust my naming conventions here quickly. Okay, so we're going to say disabled dry, and at this point, we add that to the queue. Now we want to send it to someone, but we don't want to use we want to make all of our stems with all of the effects. So let's say if we have drums and we have more of the same reverb as a send on the snare and then less on the kick. At this point, I want to include all of my groups and sends, but not the master effects processing, because maybe we're making stems for the mastering engineer that they requested. So let's add that to the queue. Now for the live performance, the artist wants all of the stems, but with the master effects included. So they want to be able to take that and on their Cubase laptop, hit play and have everything just play back raw audio files with all the processing. So let's add that to our queue. Let's say I'm a composer and I have a huge template of 3,000 plus tracks, but I'm not using all of them at once. So it doesn't do anyone any good to render empty files. So it takes you longer to do. It adds to confusion to whoever you're delivering files to. Is like, should there be something there? Or, why are they sending me an audio file? Something is wrong and they're going to do this. So what we could do is I'm going to go to my, I made a project logical editor preset. And I just called this, we're going to select tracks with events. So this will select all of the tracks in our project. that have events on them. So if there's no events on this particular one, it's no problem. So now when we go to our export audio mixdown, we could just say, there's this little button here, and we can say, okay, I want to take all my tracks, and we're going to sync the tracks that are selected to this list and add that to the queue. So now, instead of having to almost babysit the computer for each of these processes, these could be stored as presets. I say start queue export. And at this point, that will just, one by one, render all these files while you have a cup of coffee, you get some lunch, you come back, all of the different rendering scenarios with different naming conventions, different formats, different configurations, different folders can all be rendered that easily. So that's a huge game changer for, as people need to deliver just multiple formats, multiple files, so, we wanted to make the composer's assistant life easier too. So this type of thing with the flexible, processing options, for a long time, people wanted mono to be exported as mono, stereo as stereo. That's done. But to kind of just simplify that process. So that's what the new audio export options will allow you to do. So that's kind of most of the themes. I'll take a quick look, see if there's any other little things I've missed. There's always kind of a ton of little things throughout the program. I will just see, but I think that's a lot of what's in version 11. So you can see that even during the pandemic and during COVID, that, the Steinberg developers have really outdone themselves with this, So, I've seen a lot of comments where people are like, oh, just for the supervision plugin, or just for the job export, or just for the MIDI editing, just for being able to have my Bezier curves in my CC lanes, to be able to, one thing I did forget to show is pitch bend editing. So I'll show this, sorry. So let's say if I now have pitch bend. So, as we draw in pitch bend, we often have, a hard time actually seeing, our different, to know exactly. So we think that this is returning back to being in tune, but often it might be a little flat or a little sharp. So when dealing with pitch bend, we now have a new pitch bend grid. So we could say we're going to click on the pitch bend show semitones grid. So now we see this line here. We set the pitch bend range up and down to what's matching in the particular instrument. And we could just come right here and have that. And as we enter it in, we can see the values for how flat or sharp it is in the pitch bend. But what a lot of people want to do is to actually just go right to the line and have it snap and just, feel assured that it's going to be in tune. And that's what we could do. This little option here is the pitch bend snap. So now as we enter in notes, I could just click in that general area and that will just put the pitch bend data and snap it to being on the semitone grid. And once we're here, we could also take your pitch bend and be able to handle all of those different functions as well. So if we're to kind of summarize, we say, okay, there's small little things like, the variable high DPI resolution, the metal, graphics acceleration on Mac. We're going to have the ability to, naming track versions, the default location of files so it's easier and, more obvious, being able to see the zones or which are active and inactive when you have a divided track list to, have the new content plugins. So all the different content. So, from Bloom to vocals to Noir for cinematic stuff or Hard Knocks, so all these great content that are royalty free and can just really help you get inspired. And then when we start getting into, the MIDI editing, where we could double click to remove notes to make that easier, where we could have our scale assistant, where you could, copy our CC data, have all of our, Bezier curves, have the improved pitch bend editing, have the different capabilities for, the scale assistant, define your own scales, do editing of your scales, do, live input map to scales, quantize the MIDI notes to the scale, to going in and, doing your track folding to be able to only see what notes you want to. And then the ability of having your global tracks and seeing your markers throughout the entire project. And then think about the enhancements of the sampler track too. So being able to, just drag audio in and normalize it, choose new, trim the samples, be able to take, the different playback modes, easily set it up for the audio warp to play back different pitches but the same length, to be able to slice not only drum loops, vocal files, any instrument, and be able to replay the slice, to go into monophonic mode so that you could do different glides and stuff like that, so if you want to do your 808 glides, or if you wanted to just have a vocal file and play it in the musical mode in monophonic, where you could just play the individual pitches in MIDI from just any audio, to adding LFOs, filters, to be able to save your presets, to be able to drag new samples in and maintain all of the settings and export it to the other samplers, to going into the score editing. So if you wanted to have the same font that you do in Dorico, you wanted to be able to have kind of context sensitive inspectors, so you don't have to menu dive so much to find different parameters, and also the different overlay editing. And then once we start getting into some of the audio processing, so new graphic user interfaces for the test generator and the mixer delay, a new channel strip editor for the maximizer plugin, enhancements to the stereo imager plugin, making it multiband, incredibly useful, and having frequency add the dynamic mode, as well as 8 independent inputs, and going directly to, from there into Squasher, which is just a really game-changing dynamics processor. And again, with 3 independent sidechains. And when you want to actually start to work with, all of your metering options, I don't think there's anything that could really top Supervision for the flexibility and just, again, having it integrated directly into the program. Also, solving many types of problems with the enhanced ARA2 integration and the inclusion of Spectral Layers 1 to take out annoying frequencies, or to be able to just unmix a vocal from a 2-track with such great clarity and such ease, and to be able to not have to render everything and commit to it earlier than you may like in your workflow, to have all that kind of handled. And finally, when we go to our job export, then have that export queue so that everything that you want to be able to deliver in multiple formats, in multiple configurations, interlead, stereo, MP3, FLAC, WAV, AIF, my stems with processing, my stems as mono, stereo, and be able to just, have that one button, press that, and have all of my different deliverables, just handled that easily. So if you think about, during the pandemic time, when our office in Germany, development-wise, was basically closed and people were working from home, they did a lot of amazing work this year. So, if you look at like one little part of it, people would say it's worth the price for, 10 separate little things. So it's worth the price for Spectral Layers 1, for Supervision, for Squasher, for the export queue, for the enhanced MIDI editing, for the score enhancements. And you could go on and on with all those lists. So it's a really wonderful update for your existing Cubase users, and especially for new users. So with that, I'll just kind of take a quick look. I know we probably have a zillion questions. I may not be able to kind of field through every question, but I hope you found this helpful. And we will be kind of including, we'll have our hangout on Tuesday at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern, so same start time as we had today. So as we kind of work with that, so we'll be able to kind of go through more of those quick questions. I see there's like 18,000 comments, but I see also some themes, and we know that there's, as we mentioned at the top of the Hangout, I know some people joined afterwards, that there's going to, that there's, we had issues with the license server. So I think it's been much better today. So we apologize for that. But I think things are a bit smoother today with that, and people, one question I've gotten a lot is how to make sure that all of my preferences and everything, my key commands and, all carry over. And we could do from previous versions. One easy way of doing that is going to your edit menu to Profile Manager and just exporting your profile from your previous version. So, I think 99% of the time it will carry over, but you could always export from your previous version of Cubase or from a different computer and import it directly into Cubase here. So I'll just scan through. Let's see. I know we have lots of questions, but we'll be able to do more Q&A kind of starting next week. All right, so just seeing comments like the ARA integration is going to make your life so much easier. So it is a cut down version of Spectral Layers Pro. All right, so seeing someone doesn't use the Cubase plugins that much, but the stems is worth the price alone. So you should really check out some of the included plugins. All right. All right, so we'll just go through a couple. So see, Gareth is asking people to vote for which feature is their favorite. So I see a comment from Miller Brown, unmixed vocals. How does it know? It's just really scary, AI voodoo stuff. So, all right. So just seeing a comment that more hip hop productions will be done in Cubase now because of a new update with sampler track. So yeah, we're just showing it to Teddy Riley last night. He's a longtime Cubase guy, so he was really floored by it. And then I had to do it all again as he brought more friends to see Cubase 11. We did a little special walkthrough for them. See a comment, I can get rid of my band's crappy singer now retrospectively. So yes, you can. So that's good. Okay, so someone thought that the scale improvements would be the coolest thing, and then they saw the sampler track. That's cool. Okay, just kind of go through. So thanks everyone for joining the Hangout. If you've kind of learned something new, make sure that you hit the like button. And again, we do these Hangouts. We generally try to do them like twice a week. So as you kind of get into the new features, we could explore them in more detail. So I see a question. So why did I really buy Isotope products for then? Yeah, it's a good question. I guess it was good for the economy for someone. And just see, I've been pestering Isotope for proper ARA compatibility for RX for ages. So, and it's good to see Ambient Dave and Michael Teams and Gareth on the Hangout. So let's see. Okay, so I see people are buying it now. And I see people saying score editor is just a black box to me. So if it's a black box, you don't have to use it. But if you have to, okay, so we're just saying hello from France. Very cool, this new version. So I'd like to thank everyone for just joining. We know sometimes when, everyone always wants to, see everything in 3 minutes, but it's nice to kind of do a proper walkthrough. So See, we did about probably an hour, 45 minutes going through all. So question, will this video be available for later viewing or just a stream? So it will be available probably about an hour after we, so probably about an hour after we stop the Hangout here. Okay. So just a comment, nothing like Dorco. Dorco is an amazing program, and we're so happy to have that in the Steinberg portfolio stuff. But so, you know, and it's kind of different users, and there's obviously a lot of overlap with users, but that'll kind of give you an idea if if you're a Dorco guy and you're so used to Bravura font, which I've gotten so accustomed to because it's beautiful, and Daniel Spreadberry did an amazing job designing that font. I believe it was him. So just see, oh my God, Mystic is still in version 11. So people use it all the time, and we want to do it for compatibility with older projects. So, okay. Okay, going through some more comments. Seeing just comment, someone's disappointed that the arranger tracks weren't included in the batch mixdown dialogue. So, you know, I think that they're still going to be going through and adding features to it. So I don't think that'll be the end of all the export options. So, okay. So we see that would be nice if we got a plugin like Fuzzbox in Cubase 11.5. So I'm not familiar with Fuzzbox, but you may want to check out Quadrafuzz too. That does all sorts of great different distortion and fuzz in the multi-band format if you want. Okay, going through some more comments. There's lots of great comments. So just a comment, I have no idea what he is doing, although I'm a user for 5 years. So, you know, this Hangout was just all new features in Cubase 11. All right. Someone saying my brain is melting. So so hello, Greg. What's the difference from Spectral Layers Elements and the one included in Pro 11? So I think it's going to, you know, I think there's a pretty detailed, I've only kind of worked with the Pro and I haven't worked much with the Elements, but if you go to the spectral layers, if you go to the I think there's a comparison chart. If not, I could find one for you if you want to email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de. All right, just going through some more comments here. Okay, so we just had a quick question. How do you drag a part up or down to another track without it shifting? So if you want to do that, so let's say I'll just kind of show it. You can do this for, I'll show it with audio here. So there's a couple different ways of doing that. So just do a couple questions before we wrap up here. So let's say I have a number of audio tracks. So one way is just to, you could hold down the Alt. So let's say, and if I move it down first, here, sorry, let me just, so if I move it down and then hold down like with the Alt key and then hit Control, depending how you move it first, the first direction would be just to come here, and then that would lock it into space. So Alt to copy and Control to constrain the direction. And there's also nudge up and nudge down key commands that you could set. So see, Chris Goodall, I remember when Junkie XL put an advert out for an assistant, I got excited. Then he listed what you need to know instantly. Thought the jobs are reserved for tech wizards like Greg's. So he hasn't contacted me, but he's a super nice guy. Love Tom. Incredibly smart and, super nice guy. So we had a quick question on about the sample editor, if it shows triplets in the grid. So it's still the same situation as before. So okay, just looking through. Okay, so just see a comment from Rhonda about fix VCAs, please. So maybe if you could send an email, we could show it on the next Hangout to clubcubase@steinberg.de. See, someone feels that it's a major patch, even after kind of seeing everything with all the new stuff. So maybe as you kind of play with it and incorporate more things in your workflow. So can a Spectral Layers Pro owner with it installed start Spectral Layers 1 to check it out, like the start options in Dorco? It is a unified version, but everything that's in Spectral Layers 1 is in Spectral Layers Pro. So if it doesn't see the Spectral Layers Pro license, you have a Cubase 11 license, it'll just run in Spectral Layers 1. So good to see Ambient Dave on Hangout. So external effects, can I save each session with different external effect settings and assigned inputs and outputs? So the external effects settings and routings are still the same as in previous versions. So in the export section, are you able to export, say, a full track as one job, then mute the vocals for an instrumental as a second job and hit the export once? You could set up different scenarios like that. Okay, so my timeline, my chat field's jumping a bit. Okay, so you see, can you guys at Steinberg update to setting up audio picture in the manual, please? I get depressed looking at it, so. So I see a question, Scale Assistant works with Very Audio. I think it, I haven't tried that yet, but I see right below, yes, Igor. So you could do, okay, so I see Cubase Hub removed from list, not working for me. So I'll check that out. If you want to email me at clubcubase at steinberg.de. Okay. So I'll just try maybe the hub really quickly and see if I could do that. Yeah, so looks like it stays there for me, but I'll mention that and pass it along. Okay. So I see just a question from Rhonda. Sven, is there a fix for VCA weirdness? So if you could let me know, if you want to email me what your VCA weirdness is, I'd be happy to kind of take a look, and you can send it to clubcubase@steinberg.de. Hey, Greg, in theory, if I messed up my settings, how would I accomplish a full factory settings reset for Cubase? You could just do a hold down Alt Control Shift on Windows or Command Option Shift on Mac after booting up. And that will actually allow you could choose to disable the factory, like all the preferences, and that'll take you to kind of the known startup point. All right, so you see, can you show how to change the pitch of each slice in the sampler? So I think the sampler, the slice will be like the pitch is global for each slice. I'll try it here really quickly. So I think once you I think this might be global. Yeah, so that's going to be the same pitch. All right, so I guess we'll go ahead and wrap up here in just a couple minutes. So question: will there be new manuals? The earlier one doesn't really help much. So I think I haven't checked them. I tend not to get the manuals ever, but I'm pretty sure that there's probably Cubase 11 documentation available. You might have to just download it from the website. Okay. Okay, so with this, we're just gonna go ahead and. Okay, does anyone know if you can use Cubase to record surround sound 5.1? So Cubase can record a 5.1 interleave channel, so and mix in 5.1 surround. Okay, so a quick question, how does Cubase 11 Pro handle number of cores and multi-threading compared to gaming, which I don't care about? So we could, a lot of times what happens is, Cubase can spread its load across different processors, but a lot of plugins running a single instance of the plugin may actually, may not be able to actually deal with the with multi-cores. So good to see Ammon Tobin. It's a thrill to see you on a Hangout. So if there are hardware inserts on the master bus, can individual stems print with the relative effect of the insert applied? So if you enable I haven't tried this with, I will have to hook up kind of my compressor. I know you probably have your R&D stuff, but when you go to your audio mix down, if you have, if you choose to do, your stereo, let's say you just do the stereo mix. And then I think if you include the, if you do your stereo out here and then just choose to have this, the master groups and sends, that would probably include the external processing, would do it in real time. But you could give it a try, and I could hook up a compressor if you want to email me at Ammon. So I'll be happy to take a look. Okay. Okay, so just a quick question, how to save your project as a template. So if we're here, we could just say file to save as template, and that's really all you have to do. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap up. It's been obviously kind of a crazy week of doing videos and releases. But we're going to do the Hangouts. I'm sure a lot of people have questions on new features in Cubase and old features in Cubase, and we could go directly to the Hangouts and ask kind of more detailed questions. And if you want to send questions in advance, we'll do that at clubcubase@steinberg.de. So we see what about Very Audio? So Very Audio wasn't really updated in this version. It got a major update in version 10 to Very Audio 3. So, but we'll be doing these Hangouts. We do them regularly. If you wanted to search for particular topics on Hangouts, you can go to cubaseindex.com. So Jan, who I think is on the Hangout from Stockholm, has taken kind of all the indexes for the particular Hangouts and and put them in a searchable web page. So that's great to see. I see from Jeff Zabelski, loves new features and score. So that's great. So, but we'll see everyone for the Hangout. I want everyone to please have a okay, so real quick, does anyone know if Spectral Layers has to be downloaded independently? So as a new, so you could download it from the Steinberg Download Assistant. So you could do it there, but you could you find the Spectral Layers 1 installer. I think it's 1 installer, and for all Spectral Layers, and depending which license you have, if it's in Cubase 11, it'll launch Spectral Layers 1. If you have the Spectral Layers Pro license, it'll launch that. So, but thank you everyone for watching the Hangout. And it's really wonderful to see everyone here. We know that there were some hiccups with license activations, but it was just really, and Steinberg, is sorry that happened. It's, we're excited about the new release, as you could probably tell. There's, a lot of amazing things, and they just never had that many people actually update that fast, so it kind of wigged out the computer. So I think it's going to be getting better, but we'll do these Hangouts on Tuesdays and Fridays starting at 1 p.m. US Eastern. Please come back and check that out, and if you haven't subscribed to the channel, make sure you do that and hit the like button, and that'd be great. And we'll see you. I'm going to try to get an actual early start to my weekend. It's been kind of a last 2 weeks of 18-hour days, so it's nice to see, all the works that the team in Hamburg has done. So they make my life look easier and make my life easier by delivering such great products. So kudos to Steinberg. And I think they really did a wonderful job with this. So, but we'll see you on Tuesday. Everyone have a wonderful weekend. Please stay safe and healthy, and, check out your Cubase 11. Take care. Goodbye.